Tonight we have three excellent and amazing individuals on our panel, none other than Ivar himself, who I'm sure you are all familiar with and just heard talking. We have Joakim Sundén, who is the co-creator of the Spotify model. And we have Scott Ambler, who is, of course, the creator of Disciplined Agile, which is now part of the PMI. So what we're going to do here is we are going to discuss an article that Ivar wrote that sparked a lot of attention and traction on LinkedIn, so much so that we thought we'd create a meetup event about it and get the conversation going about it, because it was really stimulating. There were, I think, hundreds of comments, some really fascinating discussions, and we wanted to continue that discussion in this space here. Now, I'm guessing that not everyone will have read the article. So what I'm going to do to set the scene is I'm going to very briefly walk you guys through the article, just share the highlights about some of the points that were raised there, just so when the panelists discuss it, they have, you guys have the full context about what they're actually talking about. So I will very quickly share my screen and then walk you guys through the essence of the article, if you will. So hopefully you can see my screen. The article is titled "Some of the Craziest Things Working with Methods and Frameworks." And essentially, we've all been working with methods and frameworks. There's been many of them over the years. And as an industry, we've picked up on some crazy things. Very briefly, what they are is this article is proposing that we've been in a methods war for 50 years. Practices are locked in methods prisons. Method prisons are controlled by gurus. Methods have a lot in common, but have no common ground. And finally, they are theory only, and they don't support putting them into practice. So very briefly, I'll just touch on a tiny bit of detail about what these means. So the methods war, this is essentially saying that that each method has their own community supporting it, and all of the methods and the communities tend to compete with each other rather than working together. And since it's very hard to understand which method is better than the other, the language that the methods tend to use is one of preaching. And we sometimes see that the founder of the methods are great at marketing and sales and use such tactics to sell their methods. That's what the first point is about. Very briefly, the second point, the method prisons. This is essentially saying that all of the practices are locked within the methods and they cannot easily be reused by other methods. So this is where the term method prisons come from. And that's the second crazy thing that we see here. Very briefly about the essence of the third point around gurus. So a distinction here is made between a guru, who is an expert of several practices and often the creator of a method, and an expert who has actually created the practice itself of which a method uses. Methods often borrow other practices with perhaps a pat on the back to the original practice creator. And this point is talking about whether this is enough and whether this is sufficient, given the investment that the creator put into that practice. And it proposes that we need experts, but not gurus. The fourth point is the common ground, or the lack of common ground between methods. So, every method has their own uniqueness, but they actually have a lot in common. Yet they don't do a very good job of creating a common ground. So terms like software development, requirements, teams. The article exaggerates a little bit, it says, but the only commonality they share is the alphabet. So all of the various different interpretations that all the methods have of the common ground isn't necessarily very helpful. And finally, before I move on to letting the panelists continue the discussion, what we mean by the Achilles heel of method adoptions is that methods are great at providing theory, and they support providing coaches to implement the methods, but there is a gap between providing practical support in implementing the methods. So the Achilles heel of method adoptions is the gap between the theory and the practice of actually implementing it. So this is very briefly the article, and this is essentially what we're going to be discussing today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you go back to being able to see everyone. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out a quick poll just before we get started. And what I want you to do, now that you have a little bit of context around what the crazy things are that we're going to talk about, I've given you a poll to rank how crazy you think each of these points are. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a little experiment. At the end of this meetup, we're going to run the same poll and see if your opinion has changed at all based on the discussion that the lovely panelists are going to have. So in your own time, feel free to answer the poll. In Zoom, something should have popped up on your screen where you should be able to answer, I believe. So go ahead, knock yourselves out. And what I'm going to do now is, what we're going to do is hand over to the panelists where they are going to discuss each of the points one by one. And while they're doing that, we want as much opportunity for you, the audience, to weigh in and ask questions about that specific crazy thing. So feel free to use the chat system and let us know if you have any questions as the panelists are discussing. And when they're done with their discussion, we'll bring in some of your questions before we move on to the next crazy thing. And we'll repeat until we had discussed all 5 of them. So without further ado, the methods war is the first crazy thing we're going to be talking about. And Ivar, I'll give you the pleasure of kicking off the discussion between Joakim and Scott.
Okay. So yeah, I don't really know how I should ask the question, but let's hear what the 2 of you think about. Do you think this is really really crazy that we have a methods war? Do we have a methods war is maybe your first question.
Yeah, I'll jump in on this. I would say very clearly yes. You know, and they go on forever, right? It's really frustrating. So for example, you'll often see the Scrum versus Kanban war going on, right? And my method can beat up your method and all that sort of stuff. And meanwhile, you start digging into these conversations and you start seeing, well, wait a minute, the person on the Scrum side is actually working in an organization that has a few lean teams underway. And then you talk to the person on the Kanban side, and sure enough, same thing, right? Their organization is also doing Scrum in some places. So, come on. Like, just come on. Can we not observe what's really happening and observe that there's room for all these methods in their own context and in their own right, because it's observably happening, and has been for as many years as the war's been going on.
Yeah, I was exactly with the Scrum versus Kanban thing. I was early involved in the Kanban movement, if you will. Wrote a book called Kanban in Action, and as one of the first leadership retreats, I tried to propose the subject of why are so many of us talking about Scrum versus Kanban? Shouldn't we be talking about Scrum and Kanban? Because that's how I practice it, and that's how I used it. But I pretty quickly learned that people were explicitly saying that would be bad marketing. So it almost become a goal in itself to pit them against each other to create a market for Kanban. Oh, you failed with Scrum. Yes, don't try to fix that. Use our method instead. Use Kanban. And I think that's also one of the reasons behind these pointless method wars. And it's not really serving the users of the methods, but rather the creators or perpetrators. I have got, among all the comments we got, some of them implied that what's the difference between this and normal competition?
Why do we think it's a war? Isn't it just normal market competition? What do you say about that?
It's a bit extreme. Like it gets into into a religious fervor sometimes, and and strangely so. It's much more, is it hyper competitive? I don't know what to call that, but certainly the religion, the religious nature of it, particularly when there's not a lot of evidence supporting some of the claims, and particularly when the proponents on one side may know almost nothing about what the proponents on the other side are talking about, and vice versa, and yet they know that their method is way better than the other guy's method.
Yeah, it seems to quickly become related to identity, especially to the people who are early and invest a lot of themselves to connect them with the idea and maybe even the guru. Not to talk about that point too soon, but I feel that's also part of the issue, that you almost defend a person and your identity as a group at some points rather than the content of the actual methods. And that's when it becomes about beliefs and religion, and hence the term war is a little bit more appropriate to point out what the difference is to normal competition.
There are some similarities, of course, but there is some difference also, and that makes a difference. We are talking about intellectual things that are not really easy to compare with one another. So it's a lot of hand waving, and you also create almost sects around every method that is successful. And do you see a comparison between this situation and pyramid scheme?
Well, I think there's definitely a relationship in the implementation of the marketing strategy, right? So yeah, there's potential there. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's it's easy to guess where most of my examples would come from, but from what I've seen from the inside, I can be explicit about it with the Kanban community in particular, where it was like the first group of people who convened. There was a lot of talking about you will be accredited Kanban trainers and this will help you sell. It was a lot about that. I came to these retreats to talk about experience exchange and how can we transfer knowledge, what have you tried, and realized quickly that some people are more driven by the pyramid scheme and being in early on something new, so that they can actually sell that and have a share. I don't think it's necessarily always about money, but also about the feeling of being part of that something interesting really early on. So it's human.
How about we bring in a question from the audience? I think Lourdes has a pretty interesting question. Lourdes, would you like to unmute and ask your question, or shall I ask it for you? I'll give you a couple seconds. And a couple seconds has passed. Okay, so Lourdes's question is, how crazy is the statement that Agile and waterfall methods cannot coexist? Is that crazy, or can they coexist?
I'll answer that. That's absolutely, completely and utterly crazy. It's observably happening, right? There are very few organizations that are pure waterfall or pure Agile or pure lean or pure this, pure that. It's open your eyes is the quick answer to that question. And yeah, some organizations might become pure Agile, but it's going to be very small. There are just some efforts that lend themselves to waterfall that Agile really won't help, and vice versa. So I think we really need to be honest about what's happening. So yeah, it's completely crazy.
Yeah, agreed. I'd say that the reason why waterfall can actually work in many cases is because no one really follows that straw man of a waterfall that people pit agile methods against. There are a lot of collaboration over tools and or individuals and interactions over tools and processes in traditional waterfall projects and yeah, exactly what Scott said.
Yeah.
I agree.
Mm.
And look beyond software. Like really expand your horizons. Look beyond software. And then as soon as you do that, the conversation's over. Waterfall certainly applies in many non-software situations and in some software situations too, which I believe is heresy, but or considered heresy.
Great answers.
Yeah, and the essence is, of course, designed to be dependent on what kind of model you use. So it perfectly works for waterfall practices, if I say so. Most practices that are waterfall practice can be agilized, so it works for any kind of model.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for the answers. How about we do one more question before we move on to the next crazy thing? Jeff Hallett, would you like to unmute and ask your question, or if not, I can ask it on your behalf?
Why don't you go ahead? I don't remember which question it was, so go ahead.
So, have we descended into religious wars because practitioners fundamentally don't know how to choose the right tools for a given job? Would anyone
I don't really see the connection, so but maybe with a few more words I would understand it.
Yeah, I think the quick answer is yes. The fact that there's not a lot of fact-based discussions, people aren't sharing data generally. When the conversation gets down to my method can beat up your method, which they almost always do almost instantly, then yeah, it's very clearly a religious discussion. And I apologize for being derogatory using the term religious discussion there, because there's some very coherent religious discussions but anyways, but certainly in our community, it's not good. It's a religious war.
Yeah, Ivar, I think I was getting at that. For example, do people just arbitrarily argue I've adopted Kanban because I've adopted Kanban and you should adopt Kanban because I adopted Kanban, because they don't really know the strengths of Kanban, what situations Kanban works better in versus situations Scrum works better in versus et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? I mean, do they know when to choose a screwdriver over a hammer, or do they just have a hammer and therefore they use a hammer for everything, right?
Yeah, I think people learn one approach and it works mentally. They understand it. It sounds reasonable. And when they stay with that, most people don't really like a lot of changes and learn everything. So everything available. I think very much, and what Scott said is also right, spot on.
Yeah, and not only does it appear to work, but people are phenomenally good at ignoring or not even detecting the things about it that are not working well. So it's easy to look away. Oh yeah, that's not my problem. I'm just going to ignore that. And this, I think, is a huge issue with some of these discussions and that's usually where the friction is. And you don't want to hear, some people don't want to hear about the overhead of Scrum. Some people love pointing it out. So there you go. Right, and the fight begins.
So we don't notice the screws bending over while I hit it with the hammer, so I'll just keep hitting it harder with the hammer.
Yeah, and there's multiple types of hammers. Like wait until you get in the room with somebody like me that points out it's not really about that ball peen hammer you got. What about a mallet? What about a rubber mallet? What about this? What about that? When would you use a claw hammer versus a ball peen hammer? and then suddenly the hammer expert finds themselves in trouble too.
Yeah, and then there's the no true Scotsman fallacy with the religious belief. Oh, you tried Scrum and it didn't work, but did you? Then it wasn't true Scrum, you know. So every exception is then defined as then it wasn't, you weren't really doing it for real, because the method can't be faulty.
It's a great point.
That's the religious part of it, I see. But I actually, Nabil, I really like the question that I think is really on point that I saw in the chat. Who is winning? If there is a method wars, who is winning?
All are losers.
Yeah, all are losers in war.
While looking at the statistic, it seems SAFe is winning by the sheer number of big companies adopting it. They do Agile. They are not Agile, but they do it.
Yeah, when it comes, if sales is the measurement of who's winning the war, maybe, but there are perhaps other measures.
Depends how you define success, I suppose. Why don't we move on to the next point? So the next one is a really interesting one around method prisons. So this is the practices being locked in the prisons. Joakim, why didn't you share your thoughts on this one? What do you think about it? Do you agree with it? Or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen this a lot, that once you settle for a method, and there seems to be a drive in many bigger organizations to you know, they see, which is natural to me and in common, it should be like that you have so many different teams and departments, and they're all doing different things, and that creates some kind of nervousness within senior management, and they have a harder time to understanding what's going on. So they think that the solution is if we could have just one method to rule them all, one framework to use a shared and common language, so that everyone can talk to each other and everyone is doing exactly the same thing. To believe that there's some kind of shortcut that you can actually, if you're just using the same framework and method, then everything will actually sort itself out. But it is, no, in those instances, in these bigger organizations, what you actually need to do is have more conversations, have more sharing, have more understanding, more collaboration, and understand what are the different contexts and why do some people use some things and why do others use other things.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. The problem is that's a hard message to get across, because people want to hear, like the vast majority of people want to hear a simple answer. You know, so, you know, how do you do requirements in Agile? Well, you write up user stories. Come on. Like, you know, yeah, you know, user stories are cute, but there's a lot more requirements, come on, than writing user stories. And we need to do better. But everybody wants to hear the user story. Like that's what they want to hear, because it's a simple answer and they don't want to, you know, they don't want to try anything new, and they don't want to, you know, they really don't want to, you know, look into the horrors of requirements analysis. So, and you know, I can pick on testing, I can pick on architecture, any other aspect of software development, and I would say the exact same thing. So this, you know, so people want, you know, desperately want to hear a simple answer. A management desperately wants to hear a consistent answer, and yet it's simply not true. And so we need a greater level of sophistication to understand that context counts, so that we really want to have a fit for purpose approach. So my software team will work very differently than your software team, and will certainly work very differently than the help desk folks, and will work differently yet again than the marketing folks, and so on and so on and so on. But then that's complicated.
So the method prison problem comes from that the practices are described using a homegrown approach. Basically, every method, every framework has its own way of describing its practices, its content. It has its own vocabulary. Only a few terms are basically adopted all over. It has its own, the only thing it basically shares is the alphabet. And that means that if a practice, for instance, take Scrum, if Scrum is going to be part of another framework, and there are cases, I don't want to go into specific cases, they have to rewrite it. And if someone rewrite the Scrum, they just don't want to make it identical, they want to make it better. So the original author of Scrum, the co-creators of Scrum, think the new Scrum is misunderstood. So now we have a problem here. Key individuals are in disagreement on something, probably not a big issue, but there is a difference. Shouldn't be a big issue. So and that comes from that we don't have a common ground. If we had a common ground to describe practices, then could easily be compared. And I, for one, think that the original authors of a practice should be credited, not only by a pat on the shoulder. We use Scrum in our method, but instead of being part of the whole thing, being recommended and maybe even get some reward in money, frankly speaking. So I think the idea that practices become rewritten when it's locked into that prison of a method that has a rewritten Scrum, for instance. So the thing is that the method prison is because practice is not reusable over frameworks. And they are not reusable because we are rewritten. And then they change too.
Yeah, so, go ahead.
No, please.
Yeah, so this is a serious issue. And this is something that we've been dealing with in Discipline Agile for a long time. And the bottom line is that there isn't a common ground, and you don't want to have to. And even if there was, so let's just say we could identify a common ground, like truly common ground. Like CMAT's a great start for software development, but there's more to it than software development, right? So we don't really have a common ground right now. But let's say that we did. Say we did. Would we ask these method authors to go back and rewrite things? Because they'd have to, right? Because we have this. It's like legacy software now. Right? We have this legacy system, Scrum, Kanban, SAFe, DA, whatever. Suddenly the new standard comes out, the new standard, method platform comes out, and we want you to rewrite all your software. And for no good reason other than we would like everybody to be on this common platform now. That's going to be a rough message to get across. And why would, and for the very successful methods and frameworks, why would they? Where would be my economic benefit for rewriting Scrum or SAFe to be on the common platform so we could easily share it? It's
obviously Jeff Sutherland thinks so, and he has rewritten Scrum. He uses Essence for every training in Scrum, and I think the values are not only thinking about the methods that are existing today, but we will probably invent more methods in the future. And not only for software, but also for any kind of system. And today, Essence is used for hardware and also for things like innovation. There is a framework, innovation framework. Someone is competing with us.
Yeah.
So I think the values are in not having a common ground instead of starting from the alphabet.
Is someone having a medical emergency?
I was going to say, is someone okay?
I can't see anyone unmuted, JT.
David Giesler is unmuted.
For information about COVID care.
Whoever's unmuted, could you please mute? I can't see on the list anyone other than the speakers.
Maybe this is something that...
There we go.
Okay.
I think we got it. Apologies for that.
Okay. So, Scott, I think the values are significant, and also there are new values, because for instance, Essence, there are new things coming that we never had before also, namely, for instance, this Achilles Heel problem that we'll talk about later.
Any closing thoughts on this, or shall we go on to gurus as the next topic for discussion?
Just one small question here, because we're talking about how the framework, method are written and described. But if we look at Scrum, I think the concept and the principles behind it have not changed at all since the beginning. What do you think about it? The phrasing can change to adapt more use from people who want to learn how to do it, to practice it. But for those of us who try to understand how, for example, Schwaber, Sutherland, and the others who contributed to Scrum, how they thought about it, those principles behind that, they're still the same.
I agree, but I don't know if it was in response to what you were saying about legacy changes, Scott, or...
Yeah, so I think so Scrum might be a bad example, because when it's defined by 13 pages, rewriting something that small isn't so hard. How about rewriting SAFe?
Yeah, please do.
Well, okay, that might not have been my point, but still, I don't know how big the SAFe body of knowledge is, but it's pretty. We all know it's pretty big. So,
to discuss rewriting SAFe, we should have Dean Leffingwell here.
Well, that's right. Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that.
But
that's the problem we face.
It's different to rewrite SAFe. SAFe is huge, but it's also because it's not about the essentials only. It's about advanced practices, each one of them. You teach something for 4 days that is not essentials. And whereas if you rewrite, if you wrote SAFe, you wouldn't rewrite everything, but there are some things that could be done. For instance, we worked with Luke Homan, who has developed a practice, quite a big practice for SAFe about I cannot pronounce it, participatory budgeting. And one of our guys did it in 1 day and presented it to Luke, and had then essentialized this practice, which probably took quite a long time to develop originally. But now he had it, so he could select the essentials from it. And I think 1 day is just too little, but something a week for that practice would not be, and given collaboration with Luke in this case. So we're not talking about an enormous amount of time to do it. Many practices, the big work in essentializing a practice is in agreeing on the detailed words that you want to have on every element.
Fascinating. Thanks for the question and the answers. Let's move on to gurus. I'm keen to hear what you guys have to say about this one. So the gurus is the distinction between a guru, the creator of a method, who is an expert on several practices versus the expert who is the originator of a practice, and whether or not we need gurus in the industry. Scott, as a current guru, how about you kick off this one?
Yeah, so it's good and bad, right? So I think gurus get things started, or a burgeoning guru gets things started. Let's get the terminology maybe right, but I'll go back to the conversation that Ivar and I just had a few minutes ago. Like, we were talking about Scrum, which I would argue is really a community of practitioners now, and community of people, and yet we were worried about what does Jeff and well, by implication Ken think about that. And it's like, well, if we don't get their permission to do this, then obviously it's all gonna fall apart. So that's a huge problem to me. So when is there can we hand off from the guru or gurus to the community at some point and make it a true method or a true methodology or framework or whatever, if that's something we want to do. And so I gurus are good, and the concept of a guru is good and bad. I think there's more downside than good side in that. I'll just leave it at that.
I think we should distinguish between gurus and experts. Gurus are more marketing, methodology salespeople. They may have an expert area, being particularly good on one or two. Well, I feel I was one myself. I don't feel I am one by now, by the way, but I felt I was one. There are a couple of practices that I developed, use cases, component-based development, and so on. But there are lots of practices I didn't have any expertise in. But thanks to people around me, we were able to sell it and market it. And that was 80% marketing and 20% technology. So that's what I mean by a guru. If you talk about an expert, I think Jeff and Ken are more experts on Scrum in particular, but on project management in a way, modern project management. So I believe that we need experts, and they will still fight with one another. That's fine, but it's not about so much marketing and sales as it is when you compare frameworks.
To me, the problem with gurus is related to what I said earlier about the identity part and the religiousness of some of these things, where I started to see already, and it probably happened before, but in 2010, many of the Scrum conferences and Scrum communities were throwing around the term Scrum, but that's not Scrum. You're not doing it correctly. Look at here. Look at what the Scrum guide says, and they would go back to reading, and almost like people look at the Old Testament and have different debates on what does this mean, and my interpretation is this, and but now even worse, because they could say, and I've seriously heard this over and over by some really experienced people, that yeah, but I had a conversation with Ken Schwaber, and he told me that what this is really means is you should do it like this or that. And it's like, why does it even matter? Yes. I'm more interested in learning and understanding, what have you tried, how did it work, what evidence do you possibly have to support that, or even I'm content with stories on what has been working well or not for you, rather than debating what the guru has said and what the guru has written, and that's when it goes really, really wrong.
And what didn't work? And when wouldn't you use this? That is to me is a far more interesting question. When would you not do that? Because that's when you've got to get a shot at understanding. Do they understand what they're talking about? Because you should know, right? You should have a reasonably good inkling of, I think I've seen it work here. I suspect it'll work here, and I bet it's a phenomenally bad idea here. That to me is an interesting conversation.
And the interesting thing is when you talk to these several of these gurus face to face, just one-on-one, They're often very pragmatic, very reasonable, have lots of these stories, and then, oh, my time to talk. They enter the stage, and then it's, whoa, it's all black and white, and it's just marketing.
They have to sell.
Well, that's sad.
So what, to get away from that, and one of the missions or the vision of Essence is to create an ecosystem of practices where Scrum can be represented by the Scrum guide, and others can have our interpretation of what they think Scrum is. But you can compare it because they are using the same language to describe them. They have identified the key objects. And so it's a very different situation than today when you don't have any really easy way to compare practices. An ecosystem of practices that use the same very simple language to describe them would reduce this problem.
Great conversation. The next topic on no common ground sounds that's Ivar sounds like a lovely segue into that conversation point. So no common ground. Every method has its own uniqueness, but they also have a lot in common with each other. At the same time, practices are rewritten, and they can all have their own interpretation of things like software development or requirements and whatnot. Scott, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, well, there's not a lot of common ground because everybody's coming from different backgrounds and different sources, and that's actually a strength in many ways. I get concerned when people pitch, here's this technique that, here's this method that we created that worked on this one project on this one team here, and now I'm going to tell you it's going to work everywhere for everything, and and not only that, but my method will beat up your method. But people get rewarded for that. There's a very clear set of rewards for that. You get to become a guru. You get to go on stage. You get to make money. You get to start a certification scheme. There's a heck of a benefit in the marketplace for that. We are also, just in the software field alone, we are in an environment where some people celebrate not coming from a common ground, not having a degree in this or a degree in that or diploma, and there's a religious battle right there, right? So we don't have a common ground. We don't have agreement to coming to a common ground, and we're highly motivated to not come from a common ground because I get rewarded for doing that, right? And having a common ground would require a lot of work, like just to come up to speed, go to school, get a degree, then learn practical stuff on top of that, and then finally, we're at the common ground level, and that would be just in one field, let alone, the full range of what we're actually dealing with. So it's hard.
Well,
but I wish we had a common ground.
There has been a lot of interest for a common ground for basically any endeavor, not only for software development or system engineering or innovation or whatever. And then, and there is for basically any endeavor, there are a number of factors you have to consider to be successful. If you have such a common ground, that is for anything, and there are work now has been work for a couple of years to create something like that, and it's basically quite an easy thing to scale off the software engineering essence. Then you can add extensions to that fit for many different areas, for innovation, as I mentioned, and so on. Extensions, and on top of that you can build your practices, and the value is to create an ecosystem of practices that you can reuse in different situations, combinations. I believe we will have many more methods in the future than we have today, methods are really, it's the practices that are first-class citizens. Methods are just compositions of practices. And if we can get there, we educate the whole industry to become better in selecting practices. Now, you mentioned it's to understand essence. It takes a while, yes, but not everyone. If you go and learn Scrum, you don't need to understand the essence. So we don't expect people who use Scrum Essentials to have a full-fledged understanding of essence. It's an hour, 2 hours teaching. We introduce now Scrum Essentials to teams in companies, and we are talking about a few hours of getting them on board. So we should distinguish between people who are advanced experts on essence and how to create practice libraries and so on, and people who are users of these essentials. And in particular, if they use more than one practice like Scrum, as you said, it's a small one. If they have a common ground for them all, it becomes so much easier to, once you have learned a couple of practices, to learn a third, a fourth, and fifth practice. You said something earlier, Scott, I wanted to comment on, and that is that the people are really not aware of, what did you say, by the way? It was people are not really aware of what are available and so on.
Yeah.
What I really think is that getting an awareness of these 5 crazy things, just to understand that they're crazy, that the methods war is crazy, that having method prisons is crazy, that having gurus and so on. Most people really don't see it in that way. And it's similar to, once upon a time, no one had seen an iPhone. And when we get an iPhone and everyone wants to have an iPhone or similar, right? There is a problem we have to communicate and to get the awareness of a problem. And this is what we are trying to do here now. So it will take some time, but your help is very appreciated.
Yeah. I remember years ago, Ivar, you gave this phenomenally wonderful keynote. I think it was at one of the OOP conferences. I'm not totally sure though, where you were talking about your ability to predict the future and how you gave this great series of examples of, in 1995 I predicted this and it was going to happen in 2 years. And here we are so many years later, and it's just barely happened. And I think you had a factor of 7 to 1 of what you predicted, and it actually took 7 times longer. But your prediction was right, but your timing is totally off. Was based, I think. So I think the problem is we're early day, like software engineering has been around for 50, 60 years, and you can argue back and forth how long it's been around, but it's been around for a while. But that's really young. And we often point to civil engineering as here's a mature thing and they've come to agreement and they've figured out all the common ground. The answer is no, they haven't. Yeah, that's still advancing, but a civil engineering degree from Canada is next to useless in Saudi Arabia and vice versa. Right, because working in sand is a very different animal than working in with somewhere where you've got frost heave. So and there's way more civil engineering than that, of course. But yeah, so it's and those are very hard lessons to learn. So I think we've got some challenges ahead. It's going to take longer. It's good that we're starting, but it's going to take a lot longer. And I think, unfortunately,
it depends.
It depends, yeah. Good consulting answer.
It depends on what take our work on RAP, Scott, at Rational, and no one could foresee that something would come that quickly, like Agile. I remember I was at an Uppsala conference, and we're talking about XP versus RUP. And after that, I went back to rational and tried to explain to people that we have something really interesting, a threat coming here.
Didn't want to hear it.
No one wanted to hear it. We were so good, you know, so there was no risk.
Yeah.
So, but it went fast. And you really don't want to sit there and be hit by something. Be on board instead.
Yeah.
Joakim, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on no common ground. What are your opinions on that crazy thing?
Yeah, so when I worked at Spotify from 2011 to 2017, and I was very focused on what was going on there, and then growing our own approaches and so on. So when I came out at the end in 2017, I really wanted to understand what had happened in with SAFe and disciplined Agile and less, and I took courses and tried to understand it, and there was so much overlap, but no one could clearly point that out. And I would have grasped all of them much quicker if they could just have said, this is basically the same as this in Scrum, or this is an extension of that principle, or this is really what you've been using in SAFe for a year, or that Craig and Bass wrote about in their book already 20 years ago. But of course, the gurus, if you will, or the framework creators do very little of that, because they don't want to maybe show that, yeah, we basically stole this from that one, and we borrowed this from here. But they want to rewrite it in their own way, as one of the other crazy things was stated. And I know at my company, one of the most common questions we get about our course offerings is, should I choose SAFe Scrum Master or Certified Scrum Master? These two trainings. What's the difference between the different Scrum Master roles? Our answer is, of course, you should do both. But it also shows that it's very confusing what the difference is, and it shouldn't have to be.
Yeah, it's a great answer. Yeah, I think there's like 20 Scrum Master courses across all of the different methods, which is highly confusing. Awesome. Why don't we go on to the fifth and final crazy thing, the Achilles heel of method adoption. So this is the gap between theory and practice, and where methods are great at providing theory, usually providing coaches to help implement, but putting it into practice, people are often left to their own devices, which is where we see the adoption sometimes varying quite a lot. Ivar, why don't you kick off this crazy thing?
Yeah, this is something we have been struggling with for 50 years or more, at least as long as we have developed software. We are very good at developing material, content, training, websites, to arrange teaching, and to even write books and so on, papers. People learn, they go in the learning cycle. This is the learning cycle. That's where we are really good. But now we get to people are going to implement it. People start to get into a project, going to work, and they scratch their head. How many times have I heard, what did the method say? Okay, which is horrible. Instead, so we have a gap there between having learned something and to really deliver, to develop software. And this gap needs to be breached. I call that the Achilles heel. And that is one of the things that Essence has been designed to support.
Yeah, I think a big challenge here is that many of the big Agile transformations and using the frameworks for a scaled Agile approach are often run as well, mostly top-down change project, which means there's a lot of initial effort and training and designing the new organization and choosing what are we going to teach to all the people. And you can have some success in the early adopters. Those who are really eager to jump on board on this and really want to do it. They can grasp it. They can find the time to implement it and change things. And you can get some movement and get going, and everything seems fine. But as soon as you start coming to the early majority, not even talking about the late majority, these are people who won't be as eager to do this. They want to find their own time to do it. They want to investigate on their own. And that's typically also when the big initial effort with training and support and coaching is now being dialed down because the organization is now implemented or rolled out. And they struggle to get any guidance or any time or any really means to do this. And this is why I think it's super important to have create a sense of ownership in the teams and focus more on what are the goals that we're trying to achieve, that we see more in invitation-based approaches, open space agility, and so on. And then let teams more choose, okay, what practices do you think will help you reach these more business goals or outcomes? And they need to be experimenting. They need to have the responsibility and ownership of actually assessing, are the practices, the way that we're currently working, are they actually increasing our chances to meet our business goals, to delight the customer and so on. And this is where I really think a tool like Essence or something like that can give them this ownership and also tools to actually do that in practice.
Yeah, and that's exactly the approach we teach in DA, is that teams should be they should own their process, they should own their way of working, and experiment and learn, and then we provide the toolkit to leverage and improve the chances of them experimenting with things that might work for them in their situation. So the challenge, though, I think I fundamentally adopting a method is wrong. Is the wrong approach, or adopting a framework. And so it's interesting, to give Joakim a little bit of a stroke. In DA, in our marketing being what it is, we like to say, you don't want to adopt Spotify, you want to be like Spotify. You want to learn, right? That to me is the real Spotify method. They're a learning organization. That's a heck of a nuance, right? So you don't adopt the method, you adopt the approach, you adopt the thinking, you adopt the behaviors of improvement, of being a learning organization. But that's not the easy answer that people want to hear, right? These organizations, they want to hear, I want to install a method. Because that's basically the level of logic, right? It's not, not a transformation. It's not adoption. I want to install a method. I want to send my people on a couple of days of training, and I really don't want to do that because it costs money. But I can live with 2 or 3 days of training, and then I want them doing the method. But the problem is, is it the right method? Does it cover all the bases? Both answers are probably no. Do your staff have the skills to do the job that you're asking to do? Answer is probably no, right? Last week they were doing successfully doing whatever it is that they were doing. Now this week we put them through training, and next week we expect them to be doing this new method, which has to require a different set of skills. Like, there'll be some common skills, but there'll be, if you look at, traditional development versus agile software development, I'm going to start asking people, a programmer, to now be doing more testing. Heck of an assumption that they've got testing skills, right? Or I want them working with my stakeholders more often. Heck of an assumption that they have those skills. Yes, they can get them without a doubt, but it takes time. Are we going to give them the time? Probably not, because I'm desperately trying to install a method right now. And then we wonder why this doesn't work out so well.
So, as you know, I think we share the same opinion. You start with something that the team wants to work with. but nevertheless, not every member of the team may be equally skilled. So, and usually not. So then there needs to be a way for people to take whatever they have decided to use.
Yeah.
So still, I would like you to go back to the question, how do you bridge that gap between what people have agree on doing and really implement? Because that is the Achilles heel.
But we would have to agree that we need to help people, right? Like, so I think it's not only agreeing on a common ground, but it's also agreeing on the realities of learning and the realities of improvement and the need to treat people like people. I shouldn't have to say that, but in many in many organizations, they're really not treating their people like people, and there's issues as a result.
Now that is, yes. Okay, that can be seen as practices in itself. So, well,
and we have to agree on that, though.
Yeah, yes, and you have to in a large. We're not talking about the most successful frameworks are for large companies, and for large companies, they need some kind of way to communicate how we are going to work. Every team can work in its own way, but where do they have to select that way of working from somewhere, and then agree on. And usually in a team, it's not everyone sitting there and agreeing these are the practice. There are some people in the team that are more competent than others that say we are going to use these practices. Now, how do you get that over to everybody in the team? You can use coaches. That is the normal way. People try to help by providing coaches, but there are not so many coaches in the world. And coach should not spend their time on teaching what can be learned easier. So that's why I think a help in bridging the gap is critical, very critical, between what people have learned and what they have to do.
Maria had an interesting question around change management to bring into the conversation. Maria, would you like to unmute and ask your question? I can ask it for you. It's a straightforward one. Should change management knowledge / expertise be a rather mandatory prerequisite to initiate any method adoption? So essentially, should we make that skill a requirement whenever an organization sets out to adopt a method to ensure that that the change is successful?
That helps a lot if we have that kind of expertise, because changing the way you work is probably one of the most difficult processes to change in a company. It impacts your life in a very different way than if you change the sales process or something like that, particularly software development. So yes, having that kind of help, but most people don't get it, and don't get it professional. There are very few people that really can do that very well. But those people who do it can make a good life.
Yeah, I would agree. I think change management skill, if you're going to go through a change, having some change management skills and knowledge is probably a phenomenally good thing. The problem is it depends. So one of the if you're a one-trick pony, if you only know ADKAR, if you only know the Cotter approach, if you only know approach X, the change management area has the exact same issue as what we're talking about here today. There's change management gurus, they don't have a common ground, yada, yada, yada. And so Michael Sahota wrote a really good book on this topic about 10 years ago. And his basic premise was there's multiple change methods. Here's an overview of each, and here's when you would use each one. And it was a brilliant little, it was published by InfoQ, a brilliant little book. And so this is the problem we face, right? Because once again, when it comes to this topic, people want an easy answer, and there isn't one. So for example, one change, there's the Schneider change model, which is very clear about context, right? So figure out what context you're in and figure out where you want to get your culture. Yeah, it's like the Schneider change model, context model thingy. And so they're pretty clear about if you want to change, if you want to evolve your culture into something different, you got to figure out where you are now. Then based on where you are, then adopt the appropriate change management model to get you to the next step, to eventually get you to where you want to be. And then if you have to go multiple steps to get to your new desired culture, then when you get to the newer culture that's not quite there, you got to change up your change model, because the old change model no longer works as it applied to your previous culture. And now your culture's changed, so therefore you need a new change model. So the problem is it's pretty difficult. So one size does not fit all. And so I would highly suggest hiring a change management consultant, coach person that has experience along that way and who's not a one-trick pony.
For large organizations, I think it's absolutely needed to have someone
Yes.
who can explain how you do the changes. I apologize for a little pitch I want to do. I actually wrote a book about this subject once upon a time. Business process reengineering was the term for what we are doing. But now we are talking about one particular business process, namely development.
I like this notion of that people talk about change resistance and that people don't like change and change is hard but that's only true if you try to change people. There's this joke: how many agile coaches does it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb really has to want to change because inflicting change is a whole different story. And I, of course, like Spotify's approach because I was part of shaping it, but where we have a lot of focus on autonomy and this ownership that I mentioned initially. And I think that's really part of bridging the gap, where you don't talk about introducing a method, introducing a framework. You talk about, we need to be delighting our customers more. We need shorter time to market, whatever your business outcomes are. And this is the challenge that you put to the teams. And then you say, we have these suggestions for how to get there. And we offer training, we offer support, we have practices libraries, but you have to do a lot of the work figuring out what to do to get there. And then focus your efforts on following up. Are we getting there? If not, what more support and help do you need? But really, because a lot of people can resist agile practice X or Y or agile method and framework, but very few would resist. No, I don't want to delight the customers. No, I don't believe in shorter time to market. So make it up to them to actually innovate and experiment and come up with that. And this is where I think a practice library, Essence, or any other method. Well, there aren't any other methods that I know, but what would come in quite handy to give a path to this change, to make it easier for people to actually do that.
Very insightful. Thanks so much. And so, change should not be done to people. You want people to be taken along the change journey with you. So, having experienced that firsthand, I really glad to hear you guys. Really glad to hear your thoughts on that. Let's take one more question. Saud, you very patiently had your hand up for quite a while. So feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Thank you, Nabil. Since we are talking about change management, although I just wanted to share some research experience, especially with Ivar. We worked on a research project in which we had requirement change management in global software development. There were lots of practices that were proposed in the literature. And everyone was saying that, in the end was that, it is very difficult for people to pick which practice they can pick. So it was a challenge. So what we did was we essentialized all those, I believe 5 practices, which were all related to requirement change management in global software development. And what emerged from that was that, we could clearly see that which practice required what type of competencies. So, and then what our conclusion was that, since these are all essentialized, a team with it knowing its own competencies can easily pick which one will suit them better, which they are already, they have the competencies for, or more aligned towards it, and they could easily pick from there. Otherwise, there is no way to say, okay, this practice is better than the other one. So we have already experienced that after essentializing, different methods. You can call them methods or frameworks. People were calling them with different names or just a practice. And we essentialized them, and it clearly emerged because they were all in the same language. As you know, Essence also, you can specify competencies for different practices. And we could clearly tell from the competencies that how team can pick up which practice. So, they were already suited for it. Otherwise, as you have already been talking about on organizational level, but during software engineering, it's a big challenge, requirement change management. So they were able to do that. So I just wanted to, share this with you, and maybe that would also support the idea of, freeing practices from method prison and the Achilles Heels problem, how Essence can address that. This is just, I just wanted to share that. Maybe someone has comment on that. Thank you, Nabil.
It would be good. Have you published anything about it?
Yeah, we did submit to one journal, and we received amazing feedback from them. One of the reviewer was like totally for it, and other was totally against it. That what are you talking about? They were just I believe we probably had to explain Essence much more detail in there. But we're gonna rewrite it, and maybe hopefully more people will understand it. But we can send it to CMAT, and maybe you can share that case study.
Yes, good.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, this has been a fascinating discussion across the board. I have launched the same poll at the beginning, as I said I would, and I'm really keen to see if any of your answers have changed based on the discussion that the lovely panelists have been going through. So 36% of you have voted. Let's give it another 30 seconds to get a few more people finishing the poll, and then we can have a look to see if the results have changed. And I'll post the results on the Meetup as well. In the meantime, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to Ivar, Joakim, and Scott for what has been a really tremendous discussion.
Don't forget to say what you were supposed to say.
I am absolutely not going to say that. And as I was going to say, you'll be pleased to know that we have a way for you to continue this discussion with a LinkedIn group that has been created specifically to discuss these crazy things that, well, we've just been discussing. There's already over 100 members in the group, so and there's some discussions going. So I'm really keen. So if you've been interested in the discussions tonight, if you want to continue any of the discussions, then I highly recommend that you sign up to the group that I have just linked in the chat. So sign up there. There'll be more content posted, and basically everything we've discussed tonight, we can pick up on the virtual forum that is LinkedIn, and we can continue the discussion and continue solving all of our Agile problems.
Yeah, I'd actually like to encourage people who have posted in the chat. I've seen a lot of great content there.
Yeah.
You just post it again in the LinkedIn group, and then we can discuss it in more detail there.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would be great.
Support that 100%. Can you get all these messages to us so we can maybe respond later?
Yes, I can share an extract of the entire chat. No problem at all. There's been some fascinating conversations, and not just questions like that usually are, but actual conversations between people, which has been lovely to read. So Joakim, great suggestion. Continue this conversation online and more people will be able to participate and view it. So highly recommend you guys do that. Okay, I'm going to end the current poll because a lot of you have voted. I'm going to share the results to everyone so you can have a quick look. So you should be able to see the results at the moment. Unfortunately, I can't share both at the same time, it looks like. So I'll quickly run through them. The first one, the key winner was everyone with the method wars. Everyone thinks it's a 4 out of 5, which is almost absolutely crazy. Practices are locked in method prisons. Again, 4 out of 5 is the most popular answer. Same for method prisons controlled by gurus, 4 out of 5. Okay, 4 out of 5 for all of them, it seems. Except the last one where methods are theory only, the gap between methods and practice, theory and practice, people think that's 3, so about average. Now let's have a quick look at the second poll that you guys just did a few minutes ago to see if the needle has changed at all. It has. So the method wars, people think it's more crazy now than they did at the beginning of the event. The method prisons, people are about the same opinion on that, about a 4 out of 5, so still pretty crazy. The gurus is now tied 3 out of 5 and 5 out of 5. So we've got a bit, people think it's a bit less crazy than they did at the beginning of the event, which is really interesting. The common ground, people think it's absolutely crazy, 5 out of 5 now. And finally, again, the gap between theory and practice, the needle has shifted again. People think it's absolutely crazy, 5 out of 5. So really interesting to see how the conversation has enlightened people and changed people's opinions, which is exactly what we aimed to do here tonight.